I'm really fascinated by when you've spoken about the technology of previous civilizations and how this civilization is not the most technologically advanced. One thing that has really hit me between the eyes is the levitation of the pyramid stones by sound, which you've spoken of in the past, and other sources have alluded to the same thing. For many years, I've used sound to activate certain vibrational centers within my own body. So I know how powerful sound can be. Could you tell me what sound I need to intone to lift stones?
We have a question for you. What is the source of sound?
The voice?
In other words, the source of light appears to be the sun. And there is an energy in the sun. In other words, the scientists tell you that the speed of light is, and the scientists tell you that the speed of sound is.
Yeah.
And when you think of the speed of light, you think of the sun, and you think of the energy that it presents, and you think of you can feel the motion forward of it, and you've tapped into this, you believe, energy of light. In other words, it is where the electricity comes from. But is it possible that there is a nucleus or soup that contains the energy of life, not just the energy of light, that can be utilized energetically? You get a sense of what we're talking about? In other words, before you can tap into the energy of something, you have to acknowledge that it exists in some way. So how does one tap into when we pose that question to you, what does your mind tell you? What is the source of sound?
It's the vibrations of the various...
Interesting, isn't it? So now we want to propose to you that you really don't know what the source even of light is. You think it's that bright thing up there in the sky. But you don't know what the source of your energy is, because here you are with your mechanisms to interpret. In other words, you can be receivers of it, and you said the voice. In other words, you know that you can pass it on. So you are a transmitter and receiver. But the reason that we want to sort of get your juices flowing and get you to think about this a little bit is because as you ponder your own answers to these questions, it will give you a framework to ask some questions that are more on track, so that the answers that you then receive will then begin to make sense to you. Because so much of the world is starting from a flawed premise, and then when you ask a question from a flawed premise, the answer doesn't make any sense to you, because there are too many things that are out of sync with it, you see. So consider that the reason that you even know about sound is because you have this interpreter of sound. But what is the interpreter of sound? It's a mechanism that interprets vibration and translates it into sound, just like your eyes are the translators of vibration and translate into vision. So when you sleep at night, do you see in your dreams?
Yes, I think so.
And yet there is no light that is being interpreted. It's a vibrational factor. It's thought that's being interpreted. And so what we are saying to you now is that the vibration of light that is harnessed for so many things, under the vibration of sound that is harnessed, it is all the vibration of thought that is harnessed, which means it is the projection of thought with a pure intent without doubt.
Oh.
Sort of like the way you got your passport back.
Right. Are you saying then that these ancient civilizations were able to believe so much that they could lift stones?
We're saying that some among them were, not all of them. In other words, there has never been a crowd on the leading edge.
How did they reach the point of that pureness of belief?
By using the faculties of their own reasoning, and by leaving their passport at Starbucks and seeing it coming back to them, and things like that that gave them reason to believe in their own ability. By trial and error, by presenting thoughts that weren't pure and seeing the results of that, and presenting thoughts that were pure and seeing the results of that. In other words, the universe didn't just start to respond to you, now you are in this century. It has always responded to those who had pure thought. And so there have always been those that got way out ahead of what most are thinking. And this crowd here in this room today is way out ahead of from what most are thinking. In other words, the majority of people, even in this nation, and certainly in the nation that you have come from, the majority of the people are not believing in autonomy and self-empowerment and the ability to achieve anything and the power of the creative mind. There are beginning to be more buzzwords about it, and more people are beginning to express it from a peripheral point of view, but at the heart of that knowing, you are still rare, you see.
I see the value of the passport story now, because it's a case of looking not at reality, but at what you believe and putting reality to one side.
In fact, reality was much more compelling, but not as pleasing, so you refused to embrace it.
Yeah.
And because you refused to embrace reality, the universe yielded to you what you wanted and always will.